Okay, but of the hundreds or thousands of shrouds like this that exist, why do we think this one has an image of Jesus on it?
In the dim hum of a laboratory, rows of processors glowed like a digital cathedral. Streams of data scrolled across monitors until one froze. The artificial intelligence analyzing the Shroud of Turin had stopped on something it didn't understand. The program had been trained to detect patterns, but this wasn't a pattern in the usual sense. It was a pulse of order woven into chaos, an intricate, repeating symmetry hidden in the microscopic weave of ancient linen. That linen has haunted scientists and theologians for centuries. The Shroud of Turin, 14 feet of faintly imprinted fabric, bears the image of a crucified man. To some, it is the physical echo of resurrection. To others, a medieval masterpiece of deception. Generations of experiments, debates, and pilgrimages have passed through its fibers, yet the question remains suspended between faith and science. What exactly is this thing? The mystery began long before computers ever entered the story. In 1898, an Italian amateur photographer named Secondo Pia was allowed to take the first photographic plates of the shroud. When he developed them in his darkroom, the negative image revealed a startlingly clear, positive face, eyes closed, beard and hair perfectly defined. Centuries before the invention of photography, the cloth had somehow produced a natural photographic negative. Newspapers called it a miracle of light. Modern analysis only deepened the riddle. The coloration wasn't paint, pigment, or dye. Under magnification, the image sat on the outermost fibrils of the linen, less than 1/50th the width of a human hair, without soaking into the threads beneath. There were no brushstrokes, no directionality, no hint of craftsmanship. Scientists tried to recreate the effect with heat, acid, smoke, and even radiation. Nothing worked. Then, in the 1970s, researchers from the United States Air Force Academy fed photographs of the shroud into a VP-8 image analyzer, a device originally designed by NASA to map the surfaces of planets. What they found astonished them. The brightness of the image corresponded exactly to the distance between the cloth and a three-dimensional body. The darker areas were closer, the lighter farther away. The result was a perfect relief map, an encoded three-dimensional sculpture hidden in a flat piece of fabric. No known artistic method could explain it. A painting creates the illusion of depth. The shroud contained real depth data. How could something made, allegedly, in the Middle Ages store spatial information that wouldn't be discovered until the space age? For decades, the question hung unresolved. Believers saw divine technology. Skeptics saw coincidence. But when artificial intelligence entered the picture, everything changed. Unlike humans, the AI brought no bias, no belief, no need to defend miracles or debunk them. It simply processed data, millions of pixels, billions of points of reference, searching for patterns beyond human sight. And deep within those fibers, it found one. Not an image, but a code. Not a portrait of faith, but a mathematical structure. An order that shouldn't exist inside cloth or pigment. That single discovery would reopen a mystery thought to be closed, forcing science to reconsider not just what the Shroud of Turin is, but what reality itself might be capable of recording. When researchers fed ultra-high-resolution scans of the Shroud of Turin into a neural network, they expected only minor clarifications, details invisible to the human eye. But as the machine learned and adapted, something inside the data began to behave differently. Lines of code, once random, converged. A single thread of structure appeared, like a pulse of logic beneath chaos. The program isolated repeating formations, subtle symmetries stretching across the cloth's image. At first, scientists assumed it was noise, but every test they ran, infrared, ultraviolet, filtered wavelengths, returned the same result. The pattern wasn't random at all. It was deliberate. The AI detected proportional ratios woven throughout the figure, from the spacing between the eyes to the length of the arms, from the contour of the ribs to the alignment of the hands. These relationships were exact, following consistent geometric intervals found in architecture, nature, and even sound harmonics. The human body does not naturally align with such perfection, and no artist of any century could have achieved that kind of mathematical consistency by hand. The deeper the AI probed, the more it revealed. Beneath the faint image lay an invisible grid, a geometry so precise that it formed a structure of its own, independent of the man depicted. In some areas, the data mirrored the Fibonacci sequence. In others, ratios close to the golden mean. The pattern extended seamlessly across the fabric, suggesting not paint or contact, but an encoded imprint of energy. One researcher described it as a message written in mathematics. Another compared it to digital compression, a system that stores massive amounts of information in elegant simplicity. Whatever the origin, the conclusion was undeniable. The image behaved less like art and more like data. And that revelation posed an even larger problem. If the shroud truly dated to the 13th or 14th century, how could a forger have produced a data field, one that anticipated technologies like photography, holography, and now artificial intelligence? The AI's findings didn't merely question the shroud's authenticity, they defied time itself. The study's lead analyst summarized it bluntly. "We have a structure of impossible order. It's as if the image was engineered to be discovered only when humanity was capable of understanding it." Some scientists dismissed it as algorithmic overreach, a machine finding shapes where none existed. But when the program analyzed other ancient textiles for comparison, it found nothing similar. No repeating geometry, no harmonic precision, no coded balance of light and depth. Only the Shroud of Turin responded with this strange mathematical rhythm. For the first time, technology had revealed a hidden intelligence in the fabric itself, a whisper from history, waiting for a listener capable of hearing it. And while the world argued about belief versus science, one simple, unsettling truth began to take shape. If the image on the shroud wasn't created by human hands, then what force, what kind of energy could have left it there at all? Before we explore what that force might have been, make sure you're subscribed to The Forgotten Depths, where every mystery of the past meets the technology of the future. For a time, scientists thought the argument was over. In 1988, 3 world-class laboratories, Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona, each performed radiocarbon dating on a sample taken from the shroud. The results seemed unanimous. The cloth dated to somewhere between 1260 and 1390 AD. The verdict? Medieval, forged, finished. But science rarely closes its own mysteries for long. Almost immediately, researchers outside the original testing group began questioning the methodology. The tiny sample, they argued, had been taken from one of the shroud's corners, the very section that had endured the most handling, exposure, and repairs over the centuries. It was the same edge that had survived fires, floods, and centuries of processions. In 1532, a blaze in the chapel where the shroud was kept had scorched the fabric. Nuns painstakingly stitched patches over the damaged areas, weaving new threads directly into the old. The portion removed for testing came from right beside one of those repairs. To most, that sounded like nitpicking, but to chemist Raymond Rogers, it was an open wound in the logic of the study. Rogers, a member of the original Shroud of Turin research project, managed to obtain leftover threads from the same region that had been tested. What he found under the microscope changed the conversation entirely. The threads weren't pure linen like the rest of the cloth. They were mixed with cotton fibers, coated in a plant-based gum and stained with dye, precisely the kind of materials used in medieval restoration. The sample, Rogers realized, wasn't part of the original fabric at all. It was a cleverly rewoven patch from a later century. His conclusion was blunt. If you carbon date a patch, you date the repair, not the relic. Other studies soon followed, using infrared spectroscopy and X-ray fluorescence to analyze fibers from different sections of the shroud. Their results varied, but some indicated an age closer to 2,000 years, while others suggested a possible origin in the 1st century. These findings didn't replace the official carbon dating results, but they cracked open the door that science had tried to shut. What made this controversy so significant wasn't just the question of age, it was what it implied about the image itself. If the cloth wasn't medieval, then every scientific paradox within it, the negative imaging, the 3-dimensional encoding, the microscopic coloration, demanded a new explanation. And that's where artificial intelligence stepped back into the story. AI didn't need to cut, test, or touch the relic. It could analyze it digitally, on a molecular level of light and shadow. The machine cared nothing for the debate between believers and skeptics. It simply measured what was there. What it revealed rendered the carbon dating debate almost irrelevant. Whether the shroud was 600 years old or 2000, it contained something no era could explain, a mathematical and physical precision that transcended both time and technology. Scientists found themselves facing an uncomfortable question. If not the hand of an artist, then whose? And if not pigment or heat or touch, then what could have imprinted that perfect image onto linen? The next tests would reach beyond chemistry and history into something stranger, a phenomenon that suggested the image might not just record light, but the release of it. By the time artificial intelligence had stripped away every trace of visible texture, what remained was not an image at all, but a mathematical landscape, a perfect gradient of brightness that behaved like radiation captured mid-burst. The AI's analysis revealed something scientists had never been able to see before, a measurable relationship between intensity and distance. The closer a section of the cloth would have been to the body it covered, the darker its imprint. The farther away, the lighter it became. The pattern followed an exact, predictable law of energy decay. This was not how light behaves in a painting. It was how light behaves in nature, when recorded directly, not recreated by hand. The fibers of the linen had been altered at a microscopic level, only on their outermost surfaces, to a depth of less than 200 nanometers. No pigment or burn could reproduce that uniformity. It wasn't color, it was chemistry. Researchers began to test theories that once sounded like science fiction. Some revived the corona discharge hypothesis, proposing that a brief but powerful electrical field might have caused the image to form without contact. Others speculated about a pulse of ultraviolet radiation, an emission so short and intense that it could change the molecular structure of the linen without scorching it. But no experiment, no matter how sophisticated, managed to replicate the full combination of qualities found in the shroud: the superficial coloration, the three-dimensional data, and the flawless geometric consistency uncovered by AI. One physicist described it as an event print, a snapshot of an interaction between energy and matter. Another called it a holographic echo. Whatever the term, the implication was staggering. The shroud seemed to record not an object but an occurrence. The AI simulations went further. When the program inverted the geometry of the image and mapped its intensity patterns, it generated harmonic interference structures identical to those used in modern quantum imaging. This indicated phase coherence, a condition where waves of light act in perfect synchronization. Such coherence doesn't happen naturally in random emissions. It requires a single unified burst of energy, the kind seen only in controlled laser systems or theoretical physics experiments. If that's what happened, it would mean that the Shroud of Turin isn't simply the mark of a man's body. It's a frozen record of a transformation, a physical event that emitted structured energy on a scale beyond anything currently understood. The more scientists studied the data, the clearer one truth became. This image didn't behave like artwork or accident or forgery. It behaved like evidence. The linen had witnessed something powerful enough to leave behind not a burn, not a stain, but a precise molecular signature of light itself. For decades, historians and skeptics had debated faith. Now, physics was joining the conversation. If the shroud truly captured a moment of energy release, then somewhere between those microscopic threads and that impossible glow lies a story far greater than any legend, a story written not in ink, but in light. As the AI pushed deeper into its analysis, the discoveries began to defy every boundary of art, physics, and reason. What the machine found next didn't resemble any image at all. It resembled music. Within the fine grain of the shroud's brightness data, the neural network detected repeating wave patterns, tiny fluctuations in intensity that formed precise mathematical intervals. When these were translated into sound frequencies, they produced pure harmonic tones, the same proportional ratios used in early sacred architecture and classical musical scales. The deeper the researchers listened, the more structured the data became. It wasn't random static, it was rhythm. Each harmonic corresponded to a feature on the image: the curve of the shoulders, the outline of the hands, the spacing of the eyes. The geometry that once seemed decorative now behaved like a system of resonance, as if the image had been formed through vibration rather than pigment. One physicist described it as light behaving like a symphony. The researchers laughed at first, calling it the humming relic. But when the patterns held consistent under every control test, the humor faded. The shroud's geometry and its sound harmonics were mathematically linked. The image, it seemed, had been shaped by an energy that obeyed musical laws of frequency, proportion, and harmony that humans didn't begin to quantify until centuries later. Meanwhile, another discovery complicated the mystery even further. In microscopic traces of reddish residue long believed to be blood, scientists isolated fragments of mitochondrial DNA. The sequences were unusual, some linked to Middle Eastern populations, others to regions across the Mediterranean, and a few that didn't match any known modern database. It was as if the genetic code itself carried echoes of displacement, belonging to no single lineage on Earth. But the AI's next finding eclipsed even that. When the system ran linguistic pattern recognition on the face region of the image, mapping geometric ratios against known character structures, it began identifying faint shapes consistent with ancient Aramaic and Koine Greek letters. The team at first dismissed it as pareidolia, the brain's tendency to see meaning in noise. But when they reconstructed the spatial data and layered it across the chest area, several partial phrases emerged, simple, haunting fragments. Beyond life, not flesh. The researchers refused to publish the findings officially, fearing backlash from both scientific and religious communities. Yet the data leaked, and linguists who examined it confirmed that the structure was consistent with first-century dialects. The chances of random alignment were astronomically low. If authentic, it meant that the image on the shroud contained more than physical data. It carried information at multiple levels: geometric, harmonic, linguistic. The fabric wasn't just a visual record, it was a multidimensional document, merging matter and meaning. One observer, overwhelmed by the implications, described it simply: "It's like the shroud isn't a painting of a man, it's a message written in the code of light itself." That statement spread quietly through the scientific community, whispered in conferences and encrypted chats. The closer they looked, the more it seemed that the shroud wasn't a representation of something that happened long ago. It might be a record of how reality itself once spoke. As the data spread through research circles, one question began to dominate every discussion. What kind of event could generate such impossible order? A team of physicists in Geneva set out to answer it, building one of the most complex simulations ever attempted. Their goal was to determine what kind of energy release could imprint microscopic fibers without heat damage while encoding geometric and harmonic information. After months of modeling, the result was staggering. To reproduce the same spectral and physical characteristics found in the shroud, their simulation required a burst of ultraviolet radiation lasting less than 140 billionths of a second. To emit that much energy evenly across a human-sized form would demand power equivalent to the combined electrical output of all of Europe, delivered in a single instant. Yet the cloth showed no signs of scorching, no vaporization, no burn. Its fibers remained intact, changed only at the atomic level, as if matter had briefly turned to light and then back again. When the AI reconstructed the full three-dimensional model embedded within the data, the figure that appeared wasn't distorted by agony or motion. The face was peaceful, eyes slightly open, expression serene. Those present in the lab could only stare. One whispered, "This doesn't look like death, it looks like transformation." But the shroud wasn't finished revealing its secrets. Left running overnight in a passive scan, the neural network continued to analyze data correlations beyond its original parameters. By morning, it had made a connection no one anticipated. The frequency ratios hidden in the geometry matched the star alignments visible above Jerusalem during the early 1st century, the very period in which the crucifixion is believed to have occurred. The probability of coincidence was infinitesimal. Some called it a glitch, others a miracle, but the conclusion was unavoidable. Whatever energy event created the image had captured not only spatial information, but temporal data as well. The shroud behaved less like a painting and more like a hologram, an imprint of an event recorded in both space and time. And then came the final anomaly. During its last deep learning cycle, the AI began generating faint light and sound patterns, frequencies that mimicked human voice tones, though fragmented and incomplete. Before the system crashed, it printed one final line of text on screen. When the cloth breathes once more, the light will return. No one has been able to replicate that output since. The project was sealed, the data encrypted, but fragments leaked into independent archives. Across the world, small teams began searching other relics and ancient artifacts for similar symmetries. Some claim to have found them. Others insist the shroud stands alone, a singular witness to something that transcends both science and belief. Today, it rests quietly in Turin, locked in its glass case. Yet the silence feels deceptive. To those who have seen the data, the linen seems alive, still resonating, still whispering in a frequency only our technology has begun to hear. Maybe the true miracle of the shroud isn't the image itself, but that humanity finally built a machine capable of understanding it. And if this story has drawn you into the depths of what might lie beyond faith, science, and light itself, subscribe to The Forgotten Depths, because some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only witnessed.